Morning to anyone that's online. Welcome. We are in the middle of a study and I call it A Time of Jacob's Trouble, Daniel's 70th week. We had finished a study in Daniel, and I felt compelled to just continue on and look at that period that Daniel spoke about so much in Daniel 9:27. So we're basically doing a study going through the book of Revelation along with, in more of a timeline fashion, to where, at least the way I see it, as how things play out. And that includes a lot of other passages from other books, particularly Zechariah, Hosea, some things from Matthew, and so on. So we are in part 16, and we started the trumpet judgments. I got to trumpet 5 and ran into my study. I realized that I have a feeling this is exactly when that war in heaven came to its final resting spot, and that Satan was permanently thrown out of heaven. I realized we're already there, so this may be something we actually witness, that this particular, where the God's angels along with Gabriel are going to finally not allow Satan in heaven anymore. At this point, he is not allowed in heaven as a residence, that I believe, but he's allowed to go there and actually complain about us a lot. That's pretty much what he does. And oh, look what he did! Oh, look what he did! And of course, our mighty Savior Jesus Christ is our defense attorney, and he's there saying, "Well, yeah, he's covered by the blood, so you can't touch him." And so today's going to be, I'm only going to take one verse out of Trumpet 5 and look at this fall of Satan. And it gets us into chapter 12 of Revelation, where kind of like a little bit of a timeline, a mini timeline of how Satan through the centuries has tried to stop. First off, he's tried to stop Jesus from ever being born. And then he tried to, and now he's currently still trying to stop something that I believe has to happen for the tribulation to end. And that's that the Jewish nation calls out to Jesus and realizes he's their Messiah. And as a nation, they call him back. And that's what I feel Satan is trying to stop at this point through the whole tribulation. And God's allowing him to do it pretty much. So that the time we're talking about here is not going to be pretty at all, as we've been studying. So we're on trumpet 5, which on that diagram you see up there. It's the one there you see there. I don't know if you can see my pointer. It's one there that says trumpet 5, and it ends up being, what's going to end up happening is the abyss gets opened up and these strange creatures come out of it. We're going to talk about that part next week. But you notice that word woe. So this starts 3 woes. And so there's something different about these 3 particular last 3 trumpets. And when I was studying this and I got to Revelation 12, I realized that there's a comment in there about woe to the inhabitants on earth, that Satan has come down and he's finally, and realizes his time is short. So that's what I'm kind of leaning towards today. So let's get reading some scripture. If I can find my mouse. Where'd you go? There it is. So the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. So there's bottomless pit, and it says a star fell. Well, we know that stars typically are these big, large balls in the sky that we know of, but also the Bible also calls angels stars quite a few times. And so you got to kind of look in context in this particular scenario. So a star fell from heaven, and this is very indicative of an angel, but in this case, it's not a good angel. It's a bad angel. And he's given the key of the bottomless pit. So that's what this particular judgment is about. So we're going to take a look at Revelation 12, and it's a rather interesting study in itself. But first we'll start off with some little introductory things here. So a star falls from heaven. Stars typically, 90% of the time, stand for angels, both good and bad. In this case, represents the chief bad angel, Satan, better known as Lucifer, man of sin, son of perdition, and a multitude of other names. Amongst other names, so let's look at some of these names in Isaiah 14, 12 through 15. Now this is the original, I believe this is talking about the original time that Lucifer sinned, and God had expelled him from residing in heaven. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which dost weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. There's that word again. And I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. And thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. So we see a few times that this pit is mentioned. So it's interesting here that I believe this is the same pit that's going to actually be sealed and locked when Jesus returns, and that Satan is going to become permanent resident there for 1,000 years. Luke 10:18. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. So there's another indication Satan will at some point, like lightning, will fall from heaven. That's Jesus speaking there. 2 Thessalonians 2, 3 through 8. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there coming a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Again, speaking of Satan, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. This is leading into his representative talking about the Antichrist, who's a human being that's given the power by Satan to do amazing things. Remember ye not that when I was with you, I told you these things, and now ye know what withholding, that it might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let until it be taken out of the way. And then shall the wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. And one more here, talking about describing this individual, Revelation 9:11. And they had a king over them, which is in the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is abandoned, but in the Greek tongue hath his name be Apollyon. So again, speaking of this particular, again, angel of the bottomless pit. So I'm kind of trying to tie all these different things together, that I believe that what we're talking about here is Satan himself. So let's go to Revelation, and we're going to kind of dissect this a little bit. 12, mainly Revelation 12 is kind of broken into two parts. Part of it is talking more the past, leading up to the period of time when Satan is finally thrown out of heaven permanently. And then it talks about what happens, I believe, at the halfway point, which will be probably at around seal 7. So we're only going to cover the first part of Revelation 12 now, and it's a little bit of a history lesson about how Satan has been operating over the past 5,000 years. Revelation 12:1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now here's another use of stars. This is actually describing the 12 tribes of Israel. And we've got to go back to, let's read. I'm going to read through this portion first, and then we're going to kind of look at a few things in this portion. And she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child, as soon as it was born. Now, up to that point, we're talking past mostly. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. That particular verse, though, is talking the future. I believe that happens at the halfway point when the nation of Israel, because of the abomination of desolation, goes into the mountains. And most people believe in the Petra area. But back to what's happening, I believe, now during this particular trumpet. In verse 7 here. And there was war. Oh, I said Gabriel, I meant Michael. There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels. And prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which has accused them before our God day and night. That's what Satan is doing right now. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives until the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe, this is the part I was trying to get to. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that his time but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. So this is what I'm leaning to, is that I believe that this period is happening during this fifth trumpet, based on these three woes. Okay, so let's take a look at a few of this. Back to Revelation 12:1. So it appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and under her head a crown of 12 stars. Very fascinating verse. There was probably, at least a dozen different people trying to make this into some kind of timing thing, having to do with the actual stars in heaven aligning to tell us when the rapture is. Father, sing from the truth. The beauty of the Bible is that usually if you look hard enough, you're going to find some place in the Bible that explains something unusual like this. And this particular thing is actually a dream that happened way back in Genesis. And it's probably the best example of allowing the Bible to define the Bible. This verse is defined for us in Genesis 37, 9 through 11. And to set the scene here, Jacob and his 12 sons will end up becoming the 12 tribes of Israel. And Joseph is having these dreams, these weird dreams, which we know lead into the whole Egyptian famine story. But here he has a vision. And he dreamed yet another dream and told it to his brethren and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. This is his second dream, actually. And beheld the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. I can never pronounce that word right. Sorry, I know. Bow down to me is what it basically means. So you notice here, we got the dream, we got the sun, we got the moon, and we got 11 stars. Well, Joseph is having the dream. He's the 12th star. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And here Jacob's going to help us understand what this dream means, because Jacob knows. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother, that's the sun and the moon, and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And that would be the 11 stars. And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. And I think that's an important verse to indicate that Jacob knew there was something really future. It was like a prophecy, and he knew it was something interesting. But he didn't know exactly what it was going to be. But that's a great example of how the Bible can explain the Bible. Okay, on to verse 2. And she being with child. Okay, now back to the idea that we got the whole nation of Israel. She being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And here we're talking about the fact that the whole nation of Israel brought forth a child that we all know and love very much, and better known as Jesus Christ. And so that through the nation of Israel is where the Messiah was born. Travailing in birth to be pain to be delivered. This is more of a prophecy of all the pain and agony that Israel is going to go through before this child is born. Because remember, Satan is trying to stop this birth at all cost. Verse 3, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. Well, pretty much define that pretty well in a few other places. That's Satan, having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 crowns upon his heads. But just to quickly show you where we see this whole idea of these 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns. Got to go back to Daniel for that. Daniel 7:7 and 7:8. After this I saw in a night vision, behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stampeded the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now this is a dual vision. This is talking about the Roman Empire at first, but what we're talking about here is which is still future, is a revival of this empire under the Antichrist. So we see here we got the 10 horns. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn being the Antichrist, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and mouth speaking great things. That's talking about the Antichrist there. And jumping down to verse 20, and the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. This Antichrist is going to be really good at convincing people to do things against their own wisdom. He's going to be probably very attractive looking to those and have that kind of look about him that everybody's going to want to follow him. And then jumping down to verse 24 and 25. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and then think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a times, and a dividing of time. That's leading into the second half of the tribulation. And we'll get into that as we get there. So, I think we've pretty much identified who the players are here in Revelation 12. And let's see, verse 4. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven. So he basically took 1/3 of the angel forces with him during this period, which happened in the past. But they are now under his control. And that's typically when we feel like the world is coming down on us. It might be one of these deputies of Satan that's causing havoc in the world today. And they cast them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered. Now this is talking about the period of time just prior to Jesus being born. If you remember correctly, Herod had found out about the baby being born. There's actually a good list, and maybe when we get to Revelation 12 again during the break, I'll post that list of all the different times that Satan tried to eliminate the ability for Jesus to be born. There's quite a few. There's like a dozen of them, going all the way back to the Noah's flood and the whole idea of trying to corrupt the genome and stop the ability for a Messiah to come. That was a direct line from Adam. And then, of course, there's a bunch more. The ones that come to mind, there was I can't think of the other ones right off the top of my head, but I may include that next time. And they cast him to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman. So the woman here is symbolic of Israel. And the dragon was doing everything in his power to stop that baby from being born. But even after it was born, he was trying to devour the child as soon as it was born. And that, of course, gets into Herod, where he had all the babies killed. They were under 2 years old. And then during the temptations, Satan himself actually directly tried to convince Jesus to not go by the plan and to worship him. And there was a bunch of other times, like times Jesus was almost thrown off a cliff, or he was stoned, or quite a few times. Satan is still trying to figure out a way to stop that revelation from Genesis 3:15 from happening. Okay, continuing on here. A couple of things about, in a nutshell, Jesus Christ. Here we have the original time Satan sinned and was cast out of heaven. And we see it sometime between Genesis 1 and 3:15 when he deceived Eve. But he still was allowed access to complain about us, as we see as an example in Job. And this is the one time we can actually see kind of how things operate in heaven. It's kind of neat. It happens 3 times in Job, but I'm going to mention the first time. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came along with them. So we can see he had access still. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feared God and eschewed evil? And Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made a hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance to increase in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself both not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. I like that verse because it promises something. 1, Satan can't do anything without asking permission first. And 2, that God will limit what he's allowed to do, depending on our own abilities. Great verse. So back to Revelation 12:5. She brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. So this, in a nutshell, is pretty much the rest of the time from when Jesus' birth until his ascension into heaven, all in that one little verse. But again, it's this beginning portion of Revelation is kind of going through an outline of Satan's plans to try to stop this birth. And speaking of a rod of iron, just to verify that we're talking about the right person here, we'll just kind of look at a couple of verses. In Psalms 2:7-9, I will declare the decree, the Lord has said unto me, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the utmost parts of the earth for thy possession. This is God talking to Jesus, God the Father. Then shalt thou break with them with a rod of iron, thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. So we can see that rod of iron is almost always symbolic of Jesus Christ in the future, more in the future than the past. Then Revelation 19:15, classic time when we arriving back on earth with the Lord to finally put this whole tribulation thing to an end. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And then we saw that part that say caught up to be with the Father. To say it's the same word we see in Mark 16:19 when he was ascended into the heavens, and it's also what we're looking forward to. It's harpazo, or rapture, as we like to call it. Same word in the Greek. And I just picked the Mark version to mention that here it's also mentioned in this verse. So then after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven and sat on the right hand of God. Same idea, that caught up to heaven. And jump into verse 7. Verse 6 is talking about the is a future, so I'm not going to even bother talking about verse 6 right now, because that's talking about when they go into the after the abomination of desolation. So we'll get to that in Trumpet 7. So continuing on here in verse 7. And there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon fought against his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. You can imagine what it's like in heaven, constantly, the angels overhearing these conversations, for the last 5,000 years. And I can imagine it's getting old. So when this comes about, I bet you there's a huge celebration in heaven. And finally, Father has put him out of heaven permanently. But woe to those down on the earth, because that's not going to be a pleasant day down there. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of the testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And when the dragon saw he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. So he persecuted the woman. The woman still again is symbolic of Israel, because it even identifies a woman there who brought forth the man-child being Jesus Christ. So here's where I believe it's mentioned in verse 12, woe to the inhabitants of earth, and prepares to really turn up the heat on earth dwellers. Whenever you see earth dwellers too, you can almost do a study on that word. Almost 100% of the time it's talking about people that are non-saved. That's where we get the idea that we are sojourners here. This is not our home. As a Christian, as a believer in Jesus Christ, we're looking forward to our home in heaven to be with the Lord. So that whenever you see earth dwellers, it's typically talking about people who are tied to the world. They're dwelling on earth, and they don't have their eyes set on heaven. As he only has one more chance to stop his destruction, and that's if there are no Jews left to call out to the Lord to return. And we see that in Matthew, just to show what Satan is trying to accomplish during this period, I believe. Matthew 23, 37 through 39. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, that killest the prophets, stonest them which are sent unto thee. How often would I have gathered thy children together, even as the hen gathered her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. Notice he said, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem. So we're talking very specific group of people. For I say unto you, you shall not see me henceforth, till you shall say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. And that's not individual. There are definitely Messianic Jews. I've met a few that believe in the Lord Jesus Christ as their Messiah, and that they are not part of the church. But we're talking about the bulk of the nation of Israel until they actually call out to the Lord and realize that they missed their opportunity in 32 AD, that the Lord will not return during the second coming. That's what they're speaking about here. And one more verse, it's actually in all four Gospels, but in Luke 13:35, Behold, your house is left unto you desolate, and verily I say unto you, you shall not see me until the time comes when you shall say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. So that's what, besides that, that's what's going to be happening at the end of the tribulation, obviously. So we'll continue this next week during the fifth trumpet, as what happens next has some strange comments about not being able to die. And this gets into an area that I find very, very fascinating, because we're seeing a lot of stuff in this area. We'll just skip forward to that just for a second and show you. And in those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, shall desire to die, and death shall flee from thee. What a strange verse. I'm sure that, if you really wanted to, you could kill yourself. But for some reason, in that particular time, during the fifth trumpet here, men will seek death and somehow can't die. And what does that mean exactly? Well, it's kind of interesting, just like it mentions in Daniel 12, that as we get closer and closer to the end times, things are going to make more sense. And I can see this as being something that been being talked about a lot right now. It's called transhumanism. And it's not has had nothing to do with like a sexual type of thing that you might be tying it to, like transgender. That's different. This has to do with basically that old drive to try to find the fountain of youth. But they think now that they are onto something that can cause people to live forever. And it's all tied up in what they call transhumanism. So I got a video here. I don't know if we got enough time to play it. What time is it? Yeah, I got enough time to play it. I'm going to shut all my microphones off, because whenever I put a video up there, for some reason it likes to feedback. That she had some guests on, and they were talking about this whole transhumanism thing. They played some videos I wanted to play, and it was very fascinating, particularly the particular three people that I'm talking about. And that second person is sure of applying for the job of Antichrist too. So I'm going to play it from here. You'll see Jan here talking for a minute. Then we'll go into the videos. About 3 minutes.
Few comments that we have reached the point where we can hack human beings and other organisms, and then Jared Kushner comes out and says he may be the first generation that will live forever.
I think there's going to be a lot of breakthroughs on the medical front, particularly around synthetic mRNA. You can basically do anything with synthetic RNA, DNA. It's like a computer program. So, I mean, I think with enough, with effort, that's not too crazy. You could probably stop aging, reverse it if you want. You can basically do it. You can turn someone into a freaking butterfly if you want with the right DNA sequence.
I want to talk to you today about the future of our species and really the future of life. It's important because we've reached the point when we can hack not just computers, we can hack human beings and other organisms. We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
From the last year, the one thing I've tried to put a priority on since I left the White House was getting some exercise in. I think that there's a good probability that my generation is, hopefully with the advances in science, either the first generation to live forever or the last generation that's going to die.
Let's talk about some of these things. Billy Crone, welcome back to Understanding the Times Radio.
Thanks, Jan. It's always great to be on.
Pastor Mark Henry, thank you for coming in studio.
Good to be with you, Jan, and good to be with you as well, Billy.
I'm going to go back and forth with you two gentlemen. Billy, let me just throw this to you. Help us understand this astounding statement by Jared Kushner that he may be the first generation to never die. And then Elon Musk saying we're going to reverse aging. Yuval Harari. Anything he utters is usually a God-hating type of a statement, but give me your thoughts.
it's under the heading of the title. These guys that you just mentioned, whether people realize it or not, are what's called transhumanists. Transhumanists is basically the belief system that we need to use science and technology to transcend what they call human limitations. As elites, they want to bring in what they call the three supers. First, they have super longevity, meaning you don't need God, you don't need Jesus. With science and technology, we could live forever. And that's what they're saying with their statements, both Musk and also with Jared Kushner there. But even with Harari, he pictures that you may not even be a human anymore by the time we're done. And that's what this technology is going to do. But the other one, it's not just super longevity, it's super health, where they picture a world of utopia with science and technology and genetic manipulation. We'll be able to get rid of all diseases. And then the third super is called super intelligence. And I kid you not, Jan, what they forecast is with technology, they can improve human intelligence. In the 140s, a person is considered right now a genius. They want to crank it up to on the order of 1,000. But I like to remind people that sounds, quote, super, these three supers. But do you think that you and I, the average Joe, will be given super longevity and super health and super intelligence?
Okay. So, and it's just about time. Any quick questions? Any comments? Well, something I've been kind of following too a lot, particularly as I study this stuff too, is that this whole idea about CRISPR too is another technology. And they even touch base on it a little bit on that video later on. Well, I think they're going to mess up the genome so badly that that's the reason those people are not going to be able to be saved. It's going to get to the point that they're not human anymore. And so the death of Jesus Christ on the cross is no longer valid for those people. I often wondered why there's going to be a group of people. There's been plenty of people that have gone into idol worship and stuff at some point in time, and they still allowed to have salvation. But why is it this group of people in the tribulation that salvation is off the table completely? Okay. Anybody else? Yes, well, okay, so we'll end here, and we will head in and get back into these actual judgments next week. But I really thought that this is at this point, Satan is on earth, and that he is going to, as we see in these next three woes of the trumpets, and then of course going into the bowls, it's going to get really bad, and particularly when we see what happens next in this next trumpet 5 with these strange creatures that come out of the ground. So let's end with a prayer. Thank you, Lord. Thank you so much for this time to see what you have in store for the future and how things that we're seeing in our day-to-day living that are kind of giving us hints of things that you spoke about, that many we feel honored, Lord, that we're able to see some of these things that I'm sure thousands of people in the past have wanted to know exactly what some of these verses meant. So we give you praise and thanks and and help us to understand what we're seeing here, and help us to apply it to our lives so we can be ready for what comes next. And we give you all the praise and thanks. In Jesus' precious name I pray. And all the people said, Amen.